supposed to... Oh, okay.
Hello friends, my name is Elizabeth, and today we are talking about a very specific type of character that we see pop up more and more often across various types of media that seems to be written, rather poorly. That's right, we're talking about quirkiness. So, let's face it, quirkiness is in pretty much every book, film, TV show, video game these days has a quirky protagonist. And you know, why? Why is that? Well, it's probably because oftentimes the people creating those characters think of themselves as quirky and want to highlight that in their stories, rather than focusing on more standard, likable protagonists. Or it could be because people view quirkiness as innately funny and want to imbue humor into their stories. Or they're trying to write relatable characters that wouldn't be able to sit at the cool kids table in high school. Or maybe they just saw one successful quirky character and decided that was all there was left worth writing.
Find your humanity!
I don't know, but because we are inundated with quirky characters, we see a lot of them that are badly written and that annoy readers and put people off of the story, rather than drawing them in, which is what you want your protagonist to do. And that's really too bad, because quirky characters can be fun and useful characters to add in your story. So today I thought we would look at what it takes to create a quirky protagonist that readers actually like, as well as look at why most quirky characters end up leaving something to be desired. So here we go. First, let's define what it means to be quirky. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a quirky person is someone who is characterized by peculiar or unexpected traits. So there we go, that's the standard definition of quirky. But if we start taking a look at different dictionaries, we might start to get an idea of how quirky characters may have turned from slightly peculiar to downright annoying. If we look at the Merriam-Webster definition, it defines someone who is quirky as being unusual but in an especially interesting or appealing way. See, this is what writers could have been thinking about when they decided to start making all of their characters quirky. They were trying to achieve likable and just landed on quirky. Now, if we move to the classic communal dictionary, that is, urbandictionary.com, we see that people define quirky as someone who thinks they are doing something special and different, but in reality are actually really annoying. And there we go. That's the crux of it. When writers create quirky characters, they don't take into consideration the fact that their audience will view the quirky character as thinking of themselves as a special little snowflake, which will annoy your audience. We don't like stories about special snowflakes. We want to see real people making real choices and real sacrifices, no matter how fantastic or futuristic your story is. That is how you get your audience to relate to your characters, not by making them frolic around and bemoan their own uniqueness. Because you know, that's annoying. I mean, think of someone in your own life and how you would feel if they just started complaining that all of their problems stemmed from the fact that they are so unique and no one could possibly understand them. That person might not realize it, but they would be being especially annoying. In fiction, special snowflake characters are usually identified as Mary Sues, or Gary Sues, Stews. And very few people like to encounter them in their stories. So how do we backtrack away from the special snowflake character and return to a real character with real quirks? Well, the first thing you want to make sure you do is craft a character that is emotionally dynamic, meaning their emotions change over time in different circumstances. They aren't quirky 100% of the time. That's annoying and unrealistic. People are more likely to empathize with a character who exhibits a wide array of emotions, rather than just one. The easiest way to do this is to imagine a person that you've known in your real life, someone who was roundly characterized by others as quirky, and then try to remember what their actual day-to-day emotional expression looked like. It's probably best to think back to high school. Lots of quirky characters around there. I'm sure that there were some kids, whether you knew them or not, who most people would agree were quite quirky. Write down a list of behaviors that those people had that made them quirky, and then write down a list of behaviors that they did that would be considered more mainstream. For example, maybe they wore the same jean skirt every day to school, but they were also excited about prom and wore a similar dress as everyone else did that year to prom. You know, they weren't quirky in every single action that they took, because that is just not realistic. They probably also weren't quirky during heavy, stressful, or traumatic moments.
42. I remember it. I do. It's there. I know it is, because when I look at you, I can feel it.
That's a very specific type of gallows humor that writers always want to give to their quirky characters, but it usually ends up falling flat, because constantly giving funny little quips to characters during the story's most emotional moments just sucks all of the emotion out of those moments. So now let's get into the do's and don'ts of writing quirky characters. Do. make them worry about acceptance. It is very, very rare for anyone, especially young people, to simply embrace their own quirkiness full steam ahead and never worry about how people perceive them, or whether they should be doing something else in order to appear more normal. If you have your character struggle with this internal conflict, it will make them more empathetic and relatable to your audience. A fish out of water character can go on a journey to embrace their own unique quirky personality while also struggling to feel accepted. That can be a rich and emotional way to craft a quirky character. Don't make them label themselves as quirky. That almost always comes across as someone trying to be cutesy or special or unique, and it tends to rub people the wrong way. A quirky person might not even realize that the things they do are a little bit odd or out of the norm. That sense of unawareness will generally be more likable than someone who is very aware of their own quirkiness and tries to highlight them in conversation, or just like play up their own quirks for, cutesy factor. That's annoying. Do make them authentic. A truly quirky person is quirky because their own unique self is just a little off-center of everyone else's. And even though they naturally worry about fitting in or being liked, especially around people that they care about or want to like them, they're also likely to embrace the oddball bits of their personality because they recognize that that is what makes life fun and worth living. Maybe this is a character who has an extensive collection of unique objects or knowledge. Perhaps you have a character who is a cashier who loves geology and often spends their lunch breaks showing coworkers photos of their rock collection, or excitedly recounting unique rocks that they've found in the park and all of the details that go along with those rocks. That person might be considered quirky. Maybe they're always making rock puns to the guests that come to their cash register. But that person would also experience a wide variety of emotions that have nothing whatsoever to do with their unique quirk. As in, they have more in their life than just their one interest. Even though they've learned to embrace and love their unique quirkiness, and therefore come across as very quirky to others, they are still a full, complete person with other experiences in their lives that have nothing to do with their own quirkiness. Does that make sense? Don't make one single quirk their entire personality. This is true in general for writing quirky characters, if you want your audiences to actually like them or even just tolerate them, but this is especially true for quirky protagonists. If your main character is quirky because they have one singular quirky trait and everything else about them is just generic caricature behavior, then they are not a strong enough character to carry an entire story, and they will very likely put people off. This tends to be the quirky protagonist who is actually just a Mary Sue but happens to be clumsy. Your quirky character needs to have a quirk, or many quirks, amid an entire complex psyche. In other words, they need to be a full character first, and a quirky character second. Writers can get in trouble with this when they try to craft a quirky character by mirroring other already established quirky characters. And then their own character ends up feeling formulaic, unoriginal, and flat. Audiences will notice that immediately, and it will automatically put them off of your character. To avoid this, in general, try to steer clear of quirky characters that are just talkative, sassy, and naive. That singular combination of traits is the cliché quirky character that we have to deal with these days. It's overdone and it pigeonholes the entire personality of quirky into just one single persona. It's boring and it's just not very creative at this point. There are many, many other ways a person could be quirky. Do give your character their own peculiar sense of logic. Probably one of the most authentic ways to create a quirky character is to give them their own unique sense of logic, and then let that logic permeate their everyday decisions. This can end up being a character that feels real and fully rounded to an audience, instead of some cardboard cutout character that the writer just stuck some annoying traits on and labeled them quirky. That is how the quirky character goes wrong, but a unique, peculiar sense of logic is how quirky characters can go incredibly right. For example, Phoebe Buffet in Friends. She charmed audiences by always finding unique solutions to common problems and then embracing them wholeheartedly. Like when she happily ate cereal off of her very pregnant belly, you probably wouldn't find too many mainstream characters doing that. She was also always choosing to phrase the truth in unique ways that would give her an edge in arguments with her friends.
I had a hard life. My mother was killed by a drug dealer. Mother killed herself. She was a drug dealer.
Or she would twist standard social expectations by expressing her excitement before actually being ready to talk about it.
Oh, you did? He did it. He did it. Oh, what did he do? Shh, I'm talking.
It would be played for a laugh, but it would also showcase her unique sense of internal logic and how that affected her everyday life. Made her quirky. Don't mimic autistic traits in a character who is not autistic. People writing quirky characters often steal traits from autistic people, either that they've met in their real life or they've just seen portrayed on TV, and use those traits in their own quirky characters for comic relief without showing the full real experience of an autistic person. It feels icky because it feels like a way to make fun of autistic people without actually, making fun of an autistic person. Because they're just quirky, I don't like it. Don't do that. Do let their imagination get the best of them sometimes.
And then you took off your energy mask and you were Cameron Diaz. Hey, there's a chance this may have been a dream.
Quirky people often live very much of their lives inside their own head. A good way to showcase some of their quirkiness is by sometimes allowing those unique imaginings to filter down into their everyday thoughts and actions. They might think of useful or unusual solutions to problems in your story because they're the only character willing to fully utilize their imagination and try the things that they think of.
Just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
Don't make quirkiness all about humor. Offbeat or unusual comedic timing can be a characteristic of someone who is quirky. But if that's the only one quirky thing about somebody, if it consumes their entire personality, then it will tend to be viewed as inauthentic, try-hard behavior, especially if the point of their humor is to appear as unintelligent or incompetent. Or, on the other side, if you have a character whose entire personality is based around them being cool, and that is supposed to make them quirky in this world of lame-os, then that will also put people off because it's boring. It's not an emotionally complex character, and it actually just throws hate on your average everyday person who will make up the majority of your audience. Just because you, yourself, want to be cool, it doesn't mean that you can create a character who has cool as their primary personality trait, and then decide that they're quirky and therefore likable because of it. It just won't work. I mean, you can try, but you shouldn't because it won't work. Now, let's take a look at a quirky character who's generally thought of to be, annoying, and then try to tweak their character a little bit to make them more empathetic to the audience. And that character is terrible drum roll. Kimmy Gibbler from Full House, the best friend next door. She always wore 90s neon and never let the fear of offending someone keep her from speaking her mind. And that may be why she is generally disliked. Kimmy was supposed to be a comic relief character who was always getting into trouble and had stinky feet. But she also wasn't a very good friend to DJ, who was supposed to be her best friend. DJ always seemed like the one who was putting in the effort into their friendship and then just getting, beaten down on it by Kimmy. Kimmy was always insulting people, even her friends, when they tried to do something nice for her, like throw her a birthday party that she then walks out of because it isn't cool, and then ends up hurting her friends' feelings and has to have a learning moment.
Hey, this party isn't for you and your friend. It's a party for Kimmy and her friends. DJ, you're messing everything up.
She would often put herself first and belittle DJ, and it was always sort of brushed off just as part of her quirky personality. For example, she got mad at DJ for not letting her drive drunk, even though she knew DJ's mom was killed by a drunk driver. That's just not very good best friend behavior. It also didn't help her character that the entire cast of the show, including the adults, found her annoying.
When you're ready to party, do it Gibbler style.
I don't know if I want to do anything Gibbler style.
That is not a good way to endear a character to your audience, who is taking their cues from everyone else on the show. So, if you wanted to take the essence of Kimmy Gibbler and make her more empathetic while still being quirky, you might try having her react poorly to being teased constantly, like maybe her feelings would be hurt, especially when the adults in the Tanner household would make fun of her, which is how you would expect a child to feel if their friends' parents were constantly belittling them. And as a writer, you might make more of an effort to include scenes where it's clear Kimmy is trying hard to be a good friend, even with her own quirky nature, rather than always giving her learning moments after she's been a bad friend. I hope this helps you expand your horizons on what it means to be quirky, and how to craft characters that can embody the full range of possibilities that a quirky person can be. Please like and subscribe.